Okay, we're here this morning with Paula Thornton, and we'd like to talk to Paula a little bit about her career. So, Paula, tell us a little bit about why did you decide to be a band director? What was the journey that kind of took you to that place?
Well, I went to college in Louisiana, grew up in southwest Louisiana where the oil refineries were big business, so it was like the way you make a lot of money was to be an engineer. And I was an academic-minded person with high achievement levels in all my schooling. And so I went to school to become an engineer. So I went to Louisiana Tech University and also had a music scholarship in addition to the other scholarships. And so I played in the band, took lessons, and it took no time at all. And it was the love of music, just pure love of music, that had, the exposure to it had started at age, well, birth, because my mom was a musician, and took piano lessons from my old school grandmother piano teacher with the ruler on the knuckles, starting at age 5. And so I just had a love for music. That was it. Music ed was the thing to do if you did music there. You'll have a job and all of that. But it was purely the love of music, not the desire to be an educator, that brought me there and took me out of the engineering track and into the band room in that case.
So you were went to school to be an engineer. You switched to music performance or music education?
Music ed.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, so after you finished school, what happened next? And then what was your first, how did it get you to your first job?
Right. Well, I had a clarinet teacher at Louisiana Tech who was incredible, and I just worshipped him. And he moved after 2 years to the University of South Carolina to teach clarinet and saxophone there and to be the associate band director. So even though we recommend that people get some experience before they do their postgraduate work or graduate work, I followed him, basically got a graduate assistantship at the University of South Carolina, and then did a clarinet performance emphasis, but still a music ed degree, which was a blessing because the program there in that 1 year, 2 summers and a year, pedagogically, I learned so much from them, from Jim Copenhaver and Doug Graham were the band directors there. Incredible. Learned a whole lot and came out of there feeling much more confident about what I was about to try to do.
So how do you get from never living in Florida, so from South Carolina to Florida? What brings you down to Florida, and where did you land?
When you don't live in Florida, then Florida is the paradise where everyone wants to go visit. They want a vacation, and I had vacationed as a kid in Florida, and it was really fluky the way it happened because I was in grad school finishing the second summer there. I think it was 1978, finishing up, and I went to the National Band Association convention, which we would have in the summers. Back then it was a big deal. And several things happened there. It was in Knoxville, so it wasn't too bad of a trip. Went there, met a lot of people, very interesting people, saw my former college band director, and heard Paula Kreider's Crockett High School band play, which as a woman going into band directing at that time, not the traditional way that you went into high school band. And it was just completely amazing. I had no idea a high school band could sound like that, do that. Inspirational. So I saw that, and I met Frank Wicks, who was at that time the band director at the University of Florida. And so I was introduced to him, and it's like, woo, big people I'm getting to meet here. And I asked him, I said, well, is there anything available in North Florida, around where you are? Because I thought it'd be great to be near a high-profile university program like that and to be able to tap into that for students or whatever. So he said, yeah, there's one school outside of Gainesville, out in the country, he said, but it's just a mess. I don't think you'd be interested. So I found out about this school, turns out to be a junior-senior high school, and it was about 12 miles outside of Gainesville.
Which school was it?
It was Newberry Junior-Senior High School. And it's the only job I interviewed for. I drove down here from Columbia, spoke to the principal. He was good old boy, coach type guy, and he wanted to have a band program that was good. And we basically met all day long and hours. Wow. And he offered me the job on the spot, and so I took it. It's the only thing I ever interviewed for. So, and he was showing me around the band room, and it was okay. And there was this one closet that we couldn't get into, and he said, "My key doesn't work in here." He said, "This must be where all the instruments are." So I thought, okay, there's stuff in there that's not this other stuff that I'm seeing. And sure enough, that ended up being a custodial closet. There were no other instruments, so we started at ground zero. And my first year, I taught general music on the wheel, chorus, beginning band, which was 8 through 12, and compensatory math, 8th grade. And so I had a crazy schedule. And basically, I was a team player. I did whatever they wanted me to do. And eventually, I had a much better schedule through building and through their faith in my abilities to build a program.
So, and I know, of course, because we've talked about it, but so that people know, just talk a little bit about that time there in the beginning of your career and some of the mistakes that you made, and then the things that you learned that were able to propel you on to the next step.
I was that typical college kid who would hear other band programs and go out and observe and pre-intern or whatever, and it's, that I'll never have a program that sounds like that. I wouldn't dare allow that to be what my students will do. And so I landed in arguably the worst program in the entire state of Florida at that point. They had done some FBA events, but they would regularly get 4s and 3s, and there was one child in the program, an 8th grade flute player, who could read notes. And everyone else just wanted to know how it goes. If you just sing it to us, tell us how it goes, then we can play it. So it became illegal in the band room to ask how it goes. You can't do that anymore. We're going to learn how to read. So I isolated myself because I was so embarrassed by the quality of the program, and that's probably the biggest mistake I made in my career. And I understand when people are intimidated by others coming into their band rooms to try to help them, to work with them. We are afraid to be judged for what's not happening, but you don't know how to fix it. I had to kind of figure it out on my own. Because I isolated myself.
And nobody reached out to you at that point early in your career?
It took a few years, and the first person who reached out was Dick Bowles. He was at the University of Florida, retired from there, and he reached out. He had a plan for teaching kids how to sight read. And so he came out and talked to me about that and worked with the students. And then the other person from outside the area who reached out was Jack Crew. He heard my band at MPA along with Tom Bishop, and I think it may have been Oliver Hobbs. At the time, I was so clueless, I had no idea who that was. But it was a huge panel of 3 judges, and I performed on stage, went to sight reading, came back into the auditorium to sit down, and all 3 judges came to me. And it's like, what did I do? And so one of them, and I don't know I think might have been Tom, because Tom Bishop was always about propriety and all that, and he told me that he thought my attire on stage should be more appropriate than what I was wearing. If the students we wore the uniforms, with the band then, and if they're in that, then I should be something much more formal than what I was wearing. I said, okay. All right,
sir. Yes, sir.
And the other judge didn't say anything except nice job, I enjoyed it. And Jack Cruz said, you're doing some things with your band that I'm trying to do with my band. And this is when he was in Riverview. And you're really getting some things right, and I would love to come and work with your kids. And so said, great, when can we do this? And he drove from Sarasota to Gainesville and then out to Newberry. He did a rehearsal after school with my kids. He would not let me pay him a penny for travel. I got a hotel room. I arranged for a hotel room, and that is all he would let me do to compensate him. And he worked like 3 hours after school with the kids. I'm sure they were, wow.
Yeah.
And talked about things like phrasing and direction of line and things that I thought we couldn't deal with because we were just getting notes
Right.
and rhythms and learning how to get a decent sound. So I think that was pivotal for me as far as we can play music here. We don't just have to be technical about things. So it was great. It was great.
So how did you decide it was time to move on? What brought you to the next stop?
I did feel like, and probably I was wrong, because there are people who have stayed in the same school forever and continued to make it grow. Robbie Roadman, oh my gosh.
Right.
Despite challenges there, he just kept getting better and better and better. But it was the 6th year, once I had actually started every student in the program, when we finally went to state and made a superior. It took me years. I'm like, what do I have to do for these people to get a superior at state? It was always excellent. It took me a while to get to state in the first place, but then I just couldn't figure it out. I could not figure out what those people wanted. And so finally, in the 6th year, every kid was mine, and we actually made that superior at state. And as soon as I found out, the first person I ran into in the stairwell at FSU was Jim Croft. And he was so gracious and so congratulatory and, saying how much he enjoyed it and appreciated the work and all of that. So that was really cool. But I did another year after that. We went back to state, and we did not get a superior. And it was like, at that point, I thought, well, not knowing any better, I've probably maxed out what I can do here, and I need to move on. So I did stay there 7 years, and that was, that there's that book, Everything You Ever Needed to Know. I learned in kindergarten or something, that old book. Well, everything I needed to know about teaching, I learned in Newberry. I mean, it was great. I did beginning band and made my mistakes there, and it still kept getting better. And to all of you young people, if anyone's looking at this, it's so much better to start in a place where you can make a difference. Make your mistakes. Don't go after that ready-made program where you can only maintain or go backwards. Okay, that's my advice.
Were you approached to go to South Fork, or did you seek out that job?
I don't really remember. I think someone at the university told me about it, because my career was never one about setting those kind of goals and I'm going to play at Midwest, I'm going to march in the Macy's Parade. The things that I ended up doing, it wasn't about that. So someone told me about it, and I'm like, well, maybe, and so did interview there, and then ended up at South Fork High School in South Florida, and it was a great turning point for me to have the opportunity to have more resources and to work in a program that had more potential.
Now, just so that people know, so from South Fork, you went to Haines City, and then, of course, to Buchholz. So
Right.
you were in 4 very different programs and
Yes.
schools and communities and clienteles.
Right.
What do you take away from all 4 of those? What were the good things about being in the smaller schools, Haines City, and that kind of community, which was not then what it is now, even.
Right.
And then being in Buchholz, this high-powered program in a demanding community. What do you take away now from all 4 of those different experiences?
It's interesting. The thing that is parallel, the same in all of those situations, is that I went into those situations when they were down very, very low. Most people don't know how much of a challenge it was at the beginning at Buchholz. But it really had issues and needed a lot of TLC, and a lot of restructuring. So enough said about that. But every program was in need of improvement. And again, I enjoy that. There's something about that I don't know if it's the need to be needed by your children or whatever, but I really enjoy the building and seeing the difference that you make in the lives of those students who may be experiencing success for the first time in their lives. It may be the best thing they've ever done was being part of that musical experience and that success, that recognition. So, I think that building and changing the whole culture around what's happening in the band room and therefore in the community, like Haines City, that was amazing to bring. I mean, those kids and parents were just holding on to every word. And there's something about being in a place like that. It was starting over. It felt like starting over every year. Every year it felt like, oh my gosh, here we go again. So 5 years there was exhausting. However, it was also in Polk County, which used to be called Band Heaven, and there were great colleagues there and just wonderful, wonderful experiences with the collegiality and the support for each other and for each other's programs. So it's that thing that I think is the parallel, even though those situations were all very different. So, and people who only know of me because of the notoriety at Buchholz have no idea what I've been through. And I am happy to share that with people because I do know where you're coming from. I've been there, and I have somehow survived it.
Just as a follow-up to that, before we leave your history, you talked about having to rebuild everywhere, but you've had rural kids and sophisticated kids and smart kids and less smart kids, but you were able to be successful. So what's the common denominator, regardless of the kinds of kids? You were able to be successful with every different kind of kid that exists basically in Florida, all different categories. What's the commonality?
I have thought about that, and I really think if you sift it down to a germ, just one thing, I think it's inspiration. I really do. I think, yes, you've got to teach kids to appreciate music. You've got to show them the emotion of the music because that's an experience, the human experience that doesn't really happen anywhere else. I mean, that is special, those moments during a performance or whatever. But it's that inspiration. The students, you have to build a connection with them that shows them you're working every bit as hard as they are, that they want to please you. They don't want to disappoint you. And if it can get to that in your program, that they're doing that for themselves and all of that, but they just don't want to disappoint the person who is inspiring them to be everything that they can be. I really think that's it.
What were some significant challenges that you encountered, or a significant challenge that stands out to you throughout your teaching career as a band director?
The first thing that a lot of people want to talk about is, what was it like in 1978 starting as a woman band director? Because talk about a non-traditional, at the high school level. I was very fortunate to come to Florida, because I have colleagues in other parts of the country who had a really tough time at that time of the decade. Yeah. It was just tough. Just to achieve respect, to fit in, to have any sort of regard at all for your abilities. I didn't really experience that. I mean, there were things along the way, but we had these iconic women in Florida who were already highly respected. I mean, Cindy Berry, Martha Stark, Terry Patashell, and other people who since have left the state. Mallory Thompson.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, women had established position, success, and recognition in Florida. So it's probably, I would have to say, it's probably the easiest place from that perspective to get started. So that really never was the challenge that many people would think it might be. The challenge, the thread that runs through everything from my first evaluation at Newberry that said, you're doing a great job with the teaching, you need to get your workroom and your classroom space organized. Starting there, to my job right now as Director of Arts for less than 2 months here in Duval County. You don't want to turn that camera and look at my desk and my workspace. It's organization. That is my challenge. And it comes from just this kind of thinking, I think, which is part of the creative animal. So, okay, I'll own that. But it's that, and then once I am focused on something, it's the attention to detail, which is the thing that's so important about success and high achievement. So it is my greatest strength. Attention to detail is my greatest strength and my greatest weakness. Yeah. Because if you this compulsion to pay attention to all detail, and a product's never quite good enough, you've got to tweak it, you've got to make sure every single formatting. That's what I'm experiencing now in my new job, is releasing something. It's got to be right, it's got to be perfect, and that slows me down. And so,
and I'm only chuckling because I know you.
Yeah. It's a curse. Yet everyone out there thinks I'm amazingly organized. But that came from a colleague, Vicki Nolan, who I started teaching with in my 8th year of teaching when I went to South Florida, and we taught together the entire rest of the time. She's the exact opposite. Completely organized. Everything. I mean, no procrastination. You just don't procrastinate anyway. So I learned a lot in working with her, and there was a good balance there. So thank goodness for that, at least. But it's my struggle. It's my struggle.
What kind of concepts did you have to instill in your students in order for them to achieve high quality music making?
It varied. That did vary very, very much from school to school and population to population. I think it's pride, taking responsibility for your actions and having enough dignity not to want to attach yourself to a performance or a behavior that is less than acceptable, and it was just that we talked a lot about how you project yourself, how you carry yourself. What is your performance going to say about you? What is the way you enter an auditorium going to say about you? What is the way you dress? The fact that we keep our bow ties and our cummerbunds on. We don't undress and untuck our shirts. Just all of that. And again, that goes back to the attention to detail. And it's a marine philosophy. So Ms. Nolan and I were privileged to go from Haines City High School to Parris Island, to the boot camp.
Wow.
As part of the educators program, because we had a retired lieutenant colonel who was one of our band parents. His kid graduated, and he said, all right, we'll do this educators workshop for Haines City High School. It's for guidance counselors. But he said, if Paula Thornton and Vicki Nolan go, I want them to see this. And so, he's the one who, when we did have his child in the band, he got Marine jackets for us, the red, with the gold letter Marines on the back. Because he said we operated the band with some of the same principles. Yeah. So anyway, we went to this boot camp, and it was amazing. It was like the attention to detail. You make huge big deals out of little bitty things when they happen. And, whoa, okay, we're going to be held accountable. People get an idea. If you're going to make a big deal out of the little things, I'm not going to do the big bad things, because who knows what she'll do then. So it's that, the attention to detail, making a big deal, being consistent, being fair, putting the objectives, the guidelines, the rules, if you will, putting that out there so it's clearly communicated. And then whatever has to happen, reward, punishment, whatever, it's consistent, it's fair, there's no favoritism, and making that huge big deal out of the little things. That was like, oh, this is what we do all the time. So, and that was very special, because a student of ours, as it turned out, it was just coincidence, a student of ours who did not have a lot of parental support, and who was the kid left at Haines City, at 2 in the morning, no one came and picked him up, and we'd have to find a way to get him home. We're sitting there waiting with him. He graduated boot camp while we were there, and this big old Marine comes into the commissary, gives us in tears, because we were there. His parents were not there, but we were there, and he just, in tears, big old hug, thank you so much for being here. But that was the two things that were really cool about that trip to Parris Island.
Yeah.
It was great.
You taught in the classroom for how many years?
29.
So over 29 years, how were you able to keep your edge and keep growing and not, get defeated by things? I mean, how did you stay on the front edge?
Yeah. I think moving, I didn't move around as much as a lot of people do, but I did more than other people do. New challenges with new situations. That was one thing. But by the time I got to Buchholz and had to fight those battles there, it was like, look, I have 16 years experience here. Don't you know who I am? That kind of thing. And no, they didn't, and they didn't care. So we had to work through those things. But I found, for me, it's, I found inspiration in learning new music myself, learning new scores. And that was the kind of thing that I didn't get to spend much time doing, actually. It was really ending at Buchholz. There were 3 concert bands with music to prepare for all 3. There was the marching band, 2 jazz bands, and thank goodness I was able to have great people around me. Not a lot, not the huge staff for marching band that so many people are able to do or want to do. I didn't want to do that. We just wanted our small, tight-knit group to lead those children and those kids and make it a positive experience for them. But I think just the learning new scores and that was it. And then just the other thing, going back to just seeing the change in students, in kids, in parents, in communities, in administrations, in the whole school, just seeing the positive that could come out of the hard work that was going on.
Yeah.
Very gratifying.
Talk about, over that time, what are successful things? Like you talked about, getting a superior at Newberry was being probably one of the pivotal successful moments in your career. What are other things that stand out as being kind of those high water marks, things that you still think about as being such great moments, over time at any of your positions?
Right. Well, I think for going back to Haines City, it took a while to get them accomplished in the concert side of things, and that always is the focus for me. I mean, it obviously should be for everyone, but we really use the marching band as a vehicle for public relations and promoting the band and all of that. And I was one, and looking back, I said this to a college class the other day, maybe if I had it to do over again, I wouldn't do any competing. And I thought about that afterwards, and I thought, no, it really, if you do it right, it can have some value. So make the FBA event, the marching event, that's the ultimate. That's what you're getting ready for. So not things after that. I mean, that should be where the season for marching culminates. And those students just basked in the glory of being the smaller band who could go to an event and really show how hard they'd worked and what they had accomplished. And it really wasn't about hardware or about trophies. I mean, for us over the whatever bands, the thing is, it's not we're going to go kick someone's butt. We're not going to win the big trophy. It's about going and demonstrating how hard we've worked and doing the best you can do. You know, that's it. I mean, can we go and achieve at the highest level possible? And frankly, it's a lot easier, in my experience, to get a marching band up to a certain level, a performance level that's superior. That's a lot easier than the concert stage. I mean, it just is. So again, that ought to tell us something about concert and how critically important that is and how scrutinized that is from an adjudication standpoint.
Now, I'm going to since you are humble and not wanting to share all of these things, but especially at Buchholz, you know, with multiple cross-hour awards and, you know, consistent superiors at state at every facet of your program, and including the auxiliary, Miss Nolan's auxiliary, all of that, and marching in the Macy's parade and taking the band to Midwest, I mean, and the Sudler flag, and all of the amazing experiences that some people will never ever get to know what those things are like in their career. Just, and I know you're being very humble and not kind of going on about those things, but for the benefit of the audience, just were those things were those gratifying things? Was the price too high? I mean, just talk a little bit about all of that success, especially at Buchholz, and what you think about it now.
Yeah, I am very proud of those accomplishments. Again, it almost feels like they just kind of happened. It's not anything I ever, you know, there are people who have their sights set on, by this age I'm going to be blah, blah, blah. By this age I'm going to do this, whatever. I had never even been to the Midwest Clinic until a couple of my colleagues encouraged me, you should go, your band. And people were saying to me when they would hear the band, you should apply for Midwest. Judges were saying at the state, you should really consider applying for Midwest. And I'm like, whatever, you know. And so finally I was convinced to go and heard the bands and experienced the event, which was totally amazing. And so I said, okay, well, I'll apply. And everybody said, don't expect to get in. You don't get in the first time. So I applied. We got in. And we got chosen, and we got a very prime performance spot. And, I mean, it was wonderful. It was wonderful. And, yes, we paid a price in more ways than one for getting there. But I do feel, again, I feel that we handled it the right way. We had great support. You know, you have to raise all that money in addition to trying to get your performance ready and worry about all those other things that go into this. But it was a great experience. And the Macy's trip to New York was a great experience, which was a lesson on how to function on sleep deprivation. I believe we, the directors, got about 7 hours sleep over 5 days. Oh. And I do not function well without sleep. But it was amazing. It really, really was. And a poignant aspect of that, I still remember the kids' faces the next September 11th after we had gone on Thanksgiving to the Macy's parade in 2000. And it was my advanced kids coming in. And the towers were falling. I had the TV on, and the 9/11 was happening. And those kids, that had been one of our tours. We had just stood on the top of the World Trade Center, one of the towers, and they're just like, it, you know, not that our personal experience with having been there and stood on that building that was collapsing, that's not that significant in it, but it really, I think, made it more personal to them. Not that the whole thing would have anyway, but yeah, that was a really emotional aspect of having done that.
So now you've kind of, as we say, crossed over to the other side now in your capacity as an administrator here in Jacksonville, and in a environment which has some challenges in trying to bring high quality music to kids.
Right.
And so, what's your experience been like now on this side? What are the things that you notice and think about now as an administrator?
Well, I'm thankful to have had the 6 years that I had here, leaving Buchholz, and I was what's called a music specialist here, and that's a sort of a hybrid teacher administrator position where you really are just there to support the teachers and do everything you can to provide professional development. And as I said, this promotion to director of arts less than 2 months ago has been, talk about keeping me energized and keeping me going. I mean, our superintendent here, who's approaching his 1 year anniversary of being in this district, is really committed to the arts, to music above, I think, everything else, and really has done so much. But it's just so fast. There's so much work to do. It's very stressful, and it's very product oriented, and it's just it's either going to re-energize me or kill me, one or the other. So it's just a lot of work, and it's exciting. It really is, and it's inspiring to see how passionate he and the people who work around him are to do what you said, improve, and music, the arts education is a huge part of that for him. So it's nice to have that success, that support and success.
We'll end with two final questions. One is, do you have a little story or anecdote that would demonstrate, now that you're here looking back a little bit, your satisfaction in choosing this life as a band director?
I think I've already alluded to several specific instances. I think it's just having had the privilege of impacting so many kids in a positive way, providing, like I said, that experience to them, that emotional connection to music, that hopefully lifelong appreciation of music, and to become a consumer of music, just to perpetuate the art along with the life skills. And all the talk now is about 21st century skills and collaboration and creativity and all of these things that we give students through band, I think, more than any elective arts type of opportunity that we can offer them. I mean, it goes right to everything that we're saying is needed now.
So we're still relevant.
Absolutely. We're more, it's like I'm on this administrative side, and it's like the academics are finally figuring it out. The other academic areas are finally figuring it out, and it's like, we've been doing that all along. It's what we do. It's how we do what we do. And so they're taking the way that we've always taught and applying it to other classrooms. And so it's kind of neat to go, could have told you this a long time ago.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay, I have another question before the final question.
Okay.
Just briefly talk about FBA, your involvement both as a director and as in a leadership position in FBA, and what FBA has meant to you in your career, your whole career here in Florida.
Yeah. It's an incredible. I've been all over the United States and talked to band directors and administrators from everywhere. FBA is really special. I mean, it really, really is. I think we have the model professional organization for the nation. And we all know that Texas is highly structured and they do a great job with so many things. I just feel that we really have it figured out. And the cool thing about it is there's that tradition and everything that's been established, but we're also not afraid. It's a little slow moving, but we're not afraid to move forward and adjust to fit the needs of our membership at any given time. And I think we're not nimble. I would not say that we're nimble, but sometimes that makes people move too fast and do too much too fast.
Right.
But I think it's a wonderful association, and I know, the change creates growing pains and resistance and all that, but that's about caring about what we're doing, and I just think it's a wonderful support system, collaboratively, collegially, and professionally.
All right, so the final question is just some words of advice, to young directors, people coming up in our career now, and your final, not your final words, but for this time, your final words to people who are, coming up.
Yeah, I've thought about this question a lot as well. I really think it comes down to one thing: don't sell your kids short. I think that it's about our expectations and the bar we set for our students. That's what determines what their capacity is for achievement, for learning, for, collaborating, for anything. And I just feel that there are teachers, not just music teachers, not just band. I think there are teachers who don't give their students enough credit. And I think that you need to make sure. You also don't want to expect them to do things that are ridiculously impossible, and then you scream at them, and because they're not doing what you want them to do. It's about keeping the focus. And when you get into the kind of things that I got into at Buchholz, it would have been easy. And you have seen the people who the focus becomes the person who's leading the organization. And it can't be that. It just can't. You've always got to take your focus and make sure, check yourself. Am I doing this for me, or am I doing this for my students and for what they will gain from the experience? So I think have high expectations, make those expectations clear, and then really believe that your students can do what you expect them to do.
Paula, thank you very much for your time with us today.
You're very welcome.